Today I'll be talking about MRI hardware and the direction where it is going to be able to transform brain imaging. We know that some of the targets for understanding brain function and circuits are in looking at the neocortex, which is about a structure that's about 1.5 to 3 millimeters thick, and also to look at mechanisms that impair brain function, one of which is the fluid flow or interstitial fluid flow that sort of drives out the brain solutes and waste from the brain. In terms of MRI imaging or non-invasive imaging, clinical MRI scanners have reached the limit when looking at, say, diffusion, where you're roughly about 2 by 2 by 2 millimeter voxels. Specialized MRI scanners can push that limit to roughly spatial resolution of the order of about 500 microns to about 1 millimeter. However, to be able to visualize axonal diameters of the order of about 1 to 20 microns, you need to be able to image roughly at the order of about 100 microns or less. That is the sort of in the meso scale. So as you can see here from these slides from Flavio Dell'Acqua, as you go to smaller and smaller voxel sizes, there's a significant loss of image signal to noise ratio, and also the limit of what the particular scanner can do. However, in the mesoscale, this is only achievable in animal MRI scanners. So in this case here from Al Johnson, you can see exquisite visualization of tractograms in the mouse hippocampus with 25 to 67 microns. However, this is achieved only in very high field, 9.4 Tesla, small bore animal scanners with 2000 millitesla per meter gradients. Achieving such resolution even then takes several days of scan time. To be able to translate this to human brain microstructure, we do need high field strength magnets, we need high performance gradients, we need high sensitivity coils, and also high acceleration to keep the scan time down to a manageable level. So as you can see here on 7T, reducing the voxel sizes means you're taking a hit in image signal to noise ratio. The loss in signal can be recovered through the use of higher field strengths. However, it's not just signal to noise ratio. There's also much higher information content that's available, as you can see in these slides here, at higher field strengths, particularly increasing susceptibility. High field magnets today are characterized by very large and very heavy magnets weighing anywhere from about 20 tons to 40 tons. They consume a great deal of liquid helium, have a very large 5 Gauss line that places limits in terms of where it can be installed, and requires a vent stack to, just in case the magnet quenches, to accommodate the liquid helium that expands over 750 times. And because these are whole body systems, the gradient performance is limited. They're limited by P&S in terms of how high or slew rate you can achieve, and also limited by gradient amplifier power in terms of the maximum gradient amplitude that can be achieved. All of this leads to very high installation costs and total systems costs. And this points to a need for a dedicated head-only high field magnets that are easy to install and also lower costs. This leads to our project, which has been funded by the Brain Initiative. This is a compact 7T magnet and system that we're building. This system is about the same size as a whole body clinical 3T scanner, occupies the same footprint, has about the same weight. The only exception is that this is cryogen free with only a closed loop system with 18 liters of liquid helium at 4 Kelvin. In addition, because it's a head-only scanner, it's able to achieve 140 millitesla per meter at 820 Tesla per meter per second slew rate, much faster than whole body systems. Also, because it has 140 receiver channels and possibly 8 transmit channels, it's able to achieve faster imaging and higher SNR. Beyond 7T, there have been some excellent systems that have been built, but for example, the 11.7 whole body system that's at field in Saclay, France, from Denis Lebihan's group, and also the NIH 11.7T 68 centimeter ball scanner, but how that's actually at 52 tons. We're looking at feasibility of building a 16 Tesla head-only system using a combination of niobium, titanium, niobium 3 tin superconducting wire, and this would be have a significantly smaller size, but we are targeting only imaging over 26 centimeter field of view. The need for high gradient performance is seen in this slide. High gradient amplitude is needed to reduce the TE time for diffusion, especially at high B values. So as you can see here, whole body MRI systems have about an 80 millitesla to 100 millitesla maximum gradient amplitude. So for a specific protocol, in this case, the connectome protocol, the human connectome protocol, you can see the TE times range anywhere from about 60 milliseconds all the way to up to 90 milliseconds at B10,000. Head-only gradients, on the other hand, are able to achieve shorter and shorter TE times. The Magnus system, which we've just recently demonstrated, at 200 millitesla per meter and 500 Tesla per meter per second, is able to reduce the TE times by about more than half, achieving roughly between 2 and 2.5 times the SNR. This allows us to go to smaller voxel sizes. His comparison between a 1.5 millimeter isotropic acquisition versus a 1 millimeter isotropic acquisition. Furthermore, because these are head-only systems, the head-only systems are able to operate at a much, much higher slew rate than whole body systems. This is because the peripheral nerve stimulation threshold is about 5 times higher than whole body systems. And this allows a much larger parameter space that you can operate on. So for in this example here, at a slew rate of 200, you can see a lot of signal loss and from dephasing and geometric distortion in areas of high susceptibility. However, going to a slew rate of 700, you can see that you're recovering a lot of that signal and also reducing the geometric distortion. This is an example from Andy Alexander from UW-Madison showing comparison between the magnet system and a whole body system. And here you can see that at different B values on these trace images, you can appreciate the higher SNR at higher B values as a result of the shorter TE. So here's basically one of the B10,000 direction images showing the major difference between a whole body system and also a specialized head-only system like Magnus. So with gradient performance, there are two things you need. You need higher gradient power, or you need higher gradient efficiency. As you can see here in this chart, as you can see here in this chart, the gradient power has sort of risen quite dramatically since the early days of MRI. So they started with about 20 kVA of peak gradient power, and we have currently in clinical systems about 2.7 kVA of power, perhaps rising to maybe 4 or 5 MVA in the future. Clinical, but the maximum gradient amplitude that can be achieved is also limited by the efficiency of the gradient coil. Clinical whole body gradient coils have about a 0.08 millitesla per meter per amp efficiency, which means that with maybe 1 to 3 MVA drivers, they can achieve a maximum of somewhere between 80 millitesla per meter to 100 millitesla per meter. Dedicated head-only systems have, because of the smaller diameter, have increased the efficiency a bit to about 0.13 to about 0.16. However, recently we introduced the Magnus gradient system that was able to achieve an efficiency of about 0.3. So with a 1 MVA driver, it can achieve a 200 millitesla per meter maximum gradient amplitude. And with a 2 MVA driver, it can go up to 200 to 300 millitesla per meter And it can even go higher if you have a higher powered gradient driver that's available. The way it's achieved here is that we use doubling the coil shield separation to 19 centimeters, adding a double layer primary, and having a small diameter for the gradient coil. All of this leads to the ability to increase Gmax without substantially increasing the power. We cannot increase the power to the gradient driver without bound, because increasing power requires a larger electrical service breaker and cooling. So to speed up the scan and improve SNR, especially in the cortical area of the brains, lightweight coils are needed. Conventional coils have been characterized by these circuit boards with a hard shell and also non-flexible. We can move towards more flexible and lightweight coils with the introduction of this air coil technology. And instead of these large, wide, heavy copper strips, we can just use thin wires. These are some slides from Patrice Cogswell and Matt Bernstein from Mayo Clinic, showing a comparison of their 16-channel air coil that's knitted into a balaclava, so it fits conformally over the head, and it compares to the 8-shell and 32 hard-shell channel coils. You can see comparable image quality. What we want to do is to work towards conformal coils that fit over the head comfortably with 48 to 64 channels, and that leads to a reduction in the G factor noise. Increasing the number of coil elements doesn't do much for the SNR in the center, as indicated from what Florian Wiesinger showed. But however, as you can see here, increasing the number of channels would increase the SNR as in the periphery of the region of the head, which is essentially where we want to increase the SNR, which is in the cortical region. Wireless coils are also heavy. Conventional coils in any form are also heavy because they have to have wires that connected to it and connectors to connect to the receiver circuits. Some work from Greg Scott has shown the feasibility of building wireless coils. So combining wireless coils with air coil technology will make very lightweight coils that can fit conformally over the head, allowing more freedom of movement, less claustrophobia, and also allowing things like EEG modules to be able to be combined with MRI. There are some technology challenges in terms of data transmission, wireless power transmission, and miniaturization of parts, but those can be overcome in time. In addition, at higher field strengths, you end up with higher field inhomogeneity because of higher susceptibility effects. And those can be addressed by either faster scanning with high slew rate systems or a combination of fast scanning with high slew rates and also local field correction or shunning. So these are some slides from Alan Song and Tom Trong from Duke University, showing that they've integrated these local shim coils into the receiver coils, and thereby achieving better field and homogeneity correction, as you can see here. Furthermore, if you want to scan fast, we really need to be able to have higher acceleration. So you can, one way of achieving high acceleration is to use high acceleration factors, but again, you're limited by G factor noise. However, there are new methods being introduced, and these are deep learning physics-based neural networks that allow you to achieve much, much higher acceleration factors and also achieve some level of denoising and maintaining sharpness in the image. This is some of the recent work that was done in our lab showing 3D MP range. This is a standard 1 millimeter acquisition in about 5 minutes with a maximum acceleration of about 2.4 times. And then here's a 1 millimeter isotropic resolution acquisition with 10 times acceleration achieved in a minute 16. You can appreciate that the neural network reconstruction has been able to reconstruct quite well, sharpens up the details in this deformable venous anomaly, developmental venous anomaly. And we can move even to higher spatial resolution. This is about 0.8 millimeter isotropic in about a minute and a half. Again, 10 times acceleration. So combination of high performance gradients with neural networks is able to achieve some faster scanning and be able to get you the spatial resolution and image quality that you need. So in summary, the direction really on hardware development is really driven by imaging requirements of SNR, spatial temporal resolution, and needed sensitivity to small scale, length scale structures. All of this needs to be achieved in short scan times where patient compliance is critical. Now, in terms of hardware development, there are limits to it. Field strength, for example, you've got magnet size, weight in helium, volume that limits how high field strength can go, including magnet superconductor. Gradients, there's a limited by gradient power, gradient Hall efficiency, and also the ability of the site electrical power and cooling infrastructure to be upgraded. Channel counts, loop size and critical, reduction of cable and connector bulk is important. And also in terms of acceleration, introducing more of these deep learning neural network type algorithms, and also larger channel counts which reduce G-factor noise. So all of this helps to improve imaging capability, but also ensures success and access and dissemination of this technology. And I'd like to close by acknowledging grant support here and also collaborators. Thank you.